welcome to our Daily Bread Ministries Teens podcast. My name is Nuhu Gaina. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm so glad you're here. Our mission is to make the life-changing wisdom of the Bible understandable and accessible to all. Our vision is to see that people of all nations experience a personal relationship with Jesus, growing to be more like him and serving in a local body of his family. Now, this podcast is for teens just like you who are looking for real conversations about faith, about life, and everything in between. Now, each week, we dive into a topic that matters to you, something that you might be thinking about or even dealing with in your own life. And we look at it through the lens of our faith in Jesus. Today, we're diving into something we all struggle with: distractions. Have you ever tried to read your Bible, but your phone kept buzzing? Or maybe you tried to focus on something very important, but you got sucked in to scrolling endlessly on TikTok. Me too. Today's episode is really about God's plan and how to crush distraction and stay focused. So we'll break down some practical ways that you can cut through the noise and really stay focused on God's purpose for you. You don't want to miss this. Let's talk more about distractions. Now, they're actually everywhere, right? Whether it's school or your friends or social media or even just the day-to-day pressures of life. Distractions can easily pull us away from the things that matter the most. So you're sitting down to pray, and suddenly you remember that funny meme that you saw, or you're halfway through your homework, and boom, you get a notification that sends you into a rabbit hole of cat videos. As Christians, we're called to stay focused on God's plan for our lives, but that's tough, especially when everything seems to be calling for our attention. So how do we handle that distraction? How do we handle those distractions? How do we stay focused, in a world that is constantly trying to distract us? And that's what we want to explore today. And we are going to dive into the scriptures to find some powerful tools that would actually help us to stay on track. All right, let's get into the heart of today's topic. So how do we crush distractions and stay focused on God's plan for our lives? You see, the Bible gives us many clear guidance on this, and we're going to look at 3 key strategies, okay? Number 1 is guarding your heart and your mind. See, distractions often start in our minds and hearts. Now think about it for a minute. What you let into your mind shapes the way you think and act. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Now, this means that if we do not protect what we allow into our hearts and minds, we can easily lose focus on what truly matters. And that's God's purpose for our lives. See, imagine your mind is like a garden, right? If you let in too many weeds, and that's distractions, they'll eventually take over and choke out the good stuff. That's your faith, your relationship with God, and your ability to focus on what he is actually calling you to become and to do. So, for example, think about Daniel in the Bible. When he was taken to Babylon, Daniel made a decision to guard his heart, right, and mind by not eating the king's food that was offered to idols. We find that in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. Even though he was in a foreign land surrounded by distractions and temptations, Daniel stayed focused on God's laws. He knew that what he let into his life would impact his ability to live out his faith. And so his choice to stay focused helped him remain faithful to God even when others were distracted. Now, practical tip for you is take a moment to really think about the distractions that are in your life currently. Are there things that you're allowing into your mind and your heart that are pulling you away from God? It could be the content that you constantly consume on social media, maybe certain friends, or even the music that you listen to. Start by making small changes. There are some accounts on your social media that you may need to unfollow because they lead you astray. Or you may need to set limits on your screen time. It's all about creating space for God, to work in your life. Now, second thing is to fix your eyes on Jesus. The Bible gives us a powerful reminder in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 to 2. It says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. The writer of Hebrews is basically comparing our faith journey to a race. Now think about it for a minute. Have you ever watched a race or a runner during a race? They're laser focused on the finish line. They're not looking at the crowd or looking sideways to see who's cheering them. No, they're focused. In the same way, we need to fix our eyes on Jesus. Now, when distractions try to pull us away, we need to remind ourselves of our ultimate goal, and that is to follow Jesus Christ. Distractions lose their power when we keep our eyes and our focus on Jesus. Remember the story of Peter, right? He was walking on water in Matthew chapter 14. He started walking out on water. He was doing just fine and focusing on Jesus. But the moment that he looked away, he started to sink because his focus was shifted from Christ to the distractions around. It's a perfect example of how important it is for us to keep our eyes on Jesus. Now, the distractions around us may seem very overwhelming, but when we stay focused on Christ, we can keep moving forward without sinking into doubt or fear. A practical tip for you is to set daily reminders to really focus on Jesus. Okay, this could be as simple as just reading a Bible verse every morning or praying before school, or even setting a notification on your phone that reminds you to refocus on God throughout the day. It's about training your mind to keep God at the center. Now, the third thing you can do is to prioritize your time with God. One of the biggest reasons distractions usually get the better of us is because we don't prioritize our time with God. When we're constantly on the go, we're between school, we're between hanging out with friends, engaging in social activities and everything else, it's easy to push our relationship with God to the back. But Matthew 6:33 tells us, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. When we put God first, everything falls into place. Now, this means making intentional time to connect with God through prayer, through reading the Bible, and worship. When we start our day focused on God, it becomes much easier to resist distractions through the day. Now, example, think about Jesus. Even though he had a very busy ministry and there were crowds constantly following him and looking for his attention, he made it a priority to spend time alone with God. In Luke, the Bible tells us, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Now, if Jesus, who was literally saving the world, made time to focus on his relationship with the Father, then we can do the same in our busy lives. One of the things you can do is to create a daily routine that prioritizes your relationship with God, your time with God. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can just start with 5, 10, 15 minutes every day. Maybe just pray before you check your phone in the morning, read a devotional. The key is consistency. When you make time for God, he will strengthen your ability to stay focused on him. Okay? So I know there are questions that you may have regarding this. Question number 1 could be, what if I keep getting distracted, though I really want to focus on God? First, remember that you're not alone. Even the Apostle Paul struggled with doing what he wanted to do versus what he didn't want to do. In Romans 7, he tells us that. The important thing is to not give up. God is patient with us. And the more we practice staying focused, the easier it becomes. Pray for strength and self-control. Okay, remember Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Question number 2 you may be having is, how do I know if something is a distraction or if it's a part of God's plan for me? That's another great question. One way to know is if something is a distraction is by asking yourself, does this thing bring me closer to God or does it take me further away? If it's pulling you away from your faith, from your values, from your principles and your relationship with God, then it's likely a distraction. So trust God's guidance, and He will reveal what's part of His plan for you. I need you to guard your heart and mind, okay? Being mindful of what you allow into your life, what you see, what you hear and think about. Fix your eyes on Jesus by staying focused on Him, even when distraction comes your way, okay? Prioritize your time, like we said, with God, and make Him your first priority, and everything will fall into place. Remember, distractions are a normal part of our lives, but with God's help, you can overcome them and stay focused on His incredible plan for you. God's plan for your life is worth the fight when you prioritize Him. He'll give you the strength that you need to crush the distractions and stay on track. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and also share it with a friend who might need some encouragement to stay focused. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay grounded, stay focused, and keep your eyes on Jesus. God's got you. That's a wrap for today's episode. My name is Nuhu Gaina. Don't forget to follow us, and you can also drop your questions and drop your comments as well. I'd really love to hear from you. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.